Good morning. Before we leave the topic of religion and sports, I wanted to go over with you the current issue of a religious expression at public school events and kind of the two different ways that that can be viewed according to the First Amendment in our Constitution. So we're seeing a lot of, right now with the current political climate, we're seeing a lot of constitutional interpretation issues in politics, and one of the main ones that is hot in sports right now concerns the idea of the freedom of religious expression. So what I have done is posted in the last discussion board, presentation on religion and sports. I have posted an article from the National Federation of State High School Associations. That's the governing body for all of high school sports. And that article breaks down the constitutional interpretation regarding prayer at public school events and a few current cases that argue the various sides of it. So what that argument is based on is the First Amendment in the Constitution, and there are two different phrases or clauses, wordings, within the First Amendment that present both of those different sides to freedom of religious expression. So the first clause that I want to bring your attention to is called the Establishment Clause. And the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment says, quote, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion." And so what that means is that the government is not going to make you believe any kind of religion. The government is not going to establish a religion for the country. And that clause is immediately followed by what we call the Freedom Clause. And the Freedom Clause says, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So then the First Amendment turns right around and says, but the government is also not going to prohibit your right to exercise whatever religion you believe. So we've got two different messages. The government shall not make a national religion, but the government will also not prohibit your right to express whatever religion it is that you choose. So we have religious expression in sports as a broad concept. So how we either prohibit it or permit it according to that First Amendment depends on how it's done. So let's look at how religious expression might be prohibited. So religious expression in public sports might be prohibited if it fell mostly under the Establishment Clause. So what would it look like if it mostly fell under the Establishment Clause? So if religious expression came mostly from the school, if it appeared to be school-sponsored, then it looks like it would be violating that Establishment Clause that said that government shall not establish a religion. So what would this look like? This might be through using the school's equipment, such as a PA system or school's facilities, or prayer being led by a coach who is an employee and a representative of that public school. So then it kind of appears that the school, which is a government institution, is establishing that religion. So now in what cases might prayer or religious expression in public schools be permitted? It might be permitted if it fell mostly under the Freedom of Speech Clause. And how might it fall under this Freedom Clause in the First Amendment is if students are acting more as individuals rather than as representatives of the school. So freedom of speech arguments are much more permissible for students who are acting as individuals. Where courts might have to make a decision one way or another is answering the question, what rights do students have to act as individuals if they are wearing a uniform that represents the school? So that one is where it might get a little more questionable. So read that article. The article talks about it better than I do. I feel like I'm kind of stumbling over my words a little bit here, but But regardless, looking at the issue from those two sides brings up some interesting questions on either side. Is if somebody's wearing the school's uniform or using the school's equipment or is having religious expression brought up by the school's staff, those are questions that may be questionable under the Establishment Clause. But if you're talking about freedom of speech, then that may be permissible under the Freedom Clause. So be familiar with that, especially if you're going to go into an area of public sports, such as high school sports, or an area where we might see these issues. So like I said before, it's a great time to be brushing up on your constitutional knowledge. And religion and sports is a great place to consider the two different sides of the First Amendment. So everybody have a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.